Mangwana ni malelepo vukenjani class vanave Africa. Welcome to Africa. Good morning. Today we begin with Zambia, where a court in South Africa has blocked the burial of former President Edgar Lungu, intensifying an emotional feud with the government. We then head to Kenya, where anti-government protests engulf the streets. In DR Congo, funding issues have frozen vital UN war crimes investigations. Zimbabwe is still reckoning with its land reform legacy 25 years later, plus rising oil prices ripple across the continent due to Middle East tensions, and Ukraine makes diplomatic inroads in Africa. Catch these stories on today's broadcast, as well as the South Africa report delivered by Arrie Hougaard on DSTV 285, GOTV 251up2.com, and NTV Africa on YouTube. My name is Ashwin Berry. Top story shortly.
Running a business isn't just about hitting the big milestones, it's also about handling the day-to-day. From equipping your office, to closing deals over lunch, to managing your team's expenses while they're on the go. Now, with the FNB Business Credit Card, you can handle everyday expenses with ease. Enjoy up to 44 days of interest-free credit, unlimited swipes, and real-time expense tracking, so you're always in control. Apply for an FNB Business Credit Card. Contact us today to get started. FNB, how can we help you?
In our top stories, a South African court has stopped the private burial of Zambia's late former president Edgar Lungu just moments before the funeral was set to begin. This dramatic halt is the latest development in a deepening dispute between Lungu's family and the Zambian government, which insists that he be given a state funeral in Zambia. The family had moved ahead with plans to bury him in South Africa, where he died aged 68, citing Lungu's own wishes and his strained relationship with current President Hakainde Hichilema. The Zambian government filed an urgent application in the Pretoria High Court, resulting in the funeral suspension pending further legal processes. The court set a hearing date on 4 August 2025 and directed the government and Lungu's family to submit legal documents in the coming weeks. This legal battle echoes past burial disputes in Africa, including the case of Kenneth Kaunda. While both parties previously agreed on a state funeral, talks collapsed over the details. President Hichilema maintains that Lungu, as a former head of state, belongs to the nation, but Lungu's family has resisted state control. The unresolved feud underscores a tense legacy between Zambia's former and current leaderships that persists beyond the grave. Kenya is gripped by nationwide unrest as thousands of protesters take to the streets demanding the resignation of President William Ruto. The demonstrations, timed to mark the first anniversary of the deadly 2024 anti-tax protests, have seen massive turnouts in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and other cities. Protesters, largely peaceful, wave Kenyan flags and chant "Ruto must go," even pausing to play football in blocked-off streets. But tensions quickly escalated as police responded with tear gas, water cannons, and baton charges. Razor wire barricades sealed off access to key government buildings, including Parliament and State House, while reports of gunshot wounds and fatalities emerged, including one death in Machakos. Citizen TV footage shows victims being rushed to Kenyatta National Hospital. Amid the chaos, opposition leaders Kalonzo Musyoka and Eugene Wamalwa lay wreaths outside Parliament in memory of victims killed a year ago. The government banned live TV and radio coverage, a move condemned by media groups and defied by outlets like KTN TV. Former Chief Justice David Maraga also joined protesters denouncing police brutality. Calls to #Occupy State House traded online as the protest movement, driven by disillusioned youth, intensified, reflecting deep-rooted frustration with economic hardship, governance failures, and a presidency seen as increasingly authoritarian. The United Nations has suspended investigations into suspected war crimes and human rights violations in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo due to a severe funding crisis. The UN Human Rights Office confirmed in a letter seen by Reuters that the probe's halt stems from unpaid contributions by member states and foreign aid cuts, particularly from the United States. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk stated that M23 rebels, Congolese government forces, and allied militias have all committed abuses, including summary executions and horrific sexual violence, especially in North and South Kivu. Alarmingly, nearly 40% of survivors of gender-based violence in the region are children. Turk emphasized that without urgent funding, the Commission cannot fulfill its mandate, and the credibility of international human rights protection is at stake. He warned that staffing shortages are critically hindering investigative work, while the OHCHR is attempting to secure budget allocations for 2026. The delay could weaken accountability mechanisms. Evidence gathered by such commissions can be crucial in building cases for international courts like the International Criminal Court. The situation underscores how financial shortfalls are obstructing justice and transparency in a region long plagued by violence and impunity. And the last of our top stories. 25 years after Zimbabwe's controversial land reform program saw the eviction of 2,500 white farmers from 4,000 farms, divisions remain over a $3.5 billion compensation deal brokered by the government. While some elderly and financially struggling farmers like Arthur Baisley have accepted the agreement, receiving just 1% in cash and the rest as long-term treasury bonds, others, such as Dion Trona, insist on full upfront payments, citing distrust in the government's financial capacity. President Mnangagwa is using the deal to mend international relations soured by the chaotic 2000 land seizures under Mugabe, which led to economic collapse and sanctions. Meanwhile, some war veterans who led those invasions are suing the government, arguing the compensation is excessive amid national hardship. Adding to tensions, new black farmers are now being asked to pay for land title deeds, especially buying back redistributed land, a move that has drawn legal challenges. Yet for many, like the Ganye family, land reform has enabled generational transformation. Today, they run a thriving farming enterprise. As tobacco production hits record highs and sanctions are lifted, Zimbabwe edges closer to stability. Still, consensus on compensation remains elusive, revealing unresolved legacies of colonization, revolution, and economic inequality. Those have been our top stories on Africa. Good morning. Shortly, we'll be talking to Arrie Hougaard as he delivers the South Africa report, including President Cyril Ramaphosa feeling that there is some underspending going on. But prior to that, it will be the weather. It's time for us to talk to Arrie Hougaard as he delivers the South Africa report from Cape Town. Good morning, Arrie. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Yes, a very good morning, Ashwin. Yes, nice to talk to you and to everyone. Good morning.
All right. Now, Arrie, in your current affairs, President Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed concern over the underspending of infrastructure budgets by municipalities across South Africa. And in your other current affairs story, many Cape Town commuters can now take the train to work again as PRASA has reopened the Central Railway line on the Cape Peninsula. Tell us more.
Yes, Ashwin, often it is more about spending too much. So underspending is not often heard, but it's underperforming also in service providing. That is actually the core of that. It was a question and answer session in the National Assembly by the minister, by the president, and that's one of the municipalities. So he put the blame on the municipalities and also the provinces. So he condemned the underspending of infrastructure budgets. So that's what it's called. So that's very important in South Africa, and that's lacking in many areas big time. It is linked, apologies, it's linked to housing, to education, to water, and to roads. As you can see in that picture, that is many of the territories or regions. Unfortunately, there is no basic maintenance. So it's more about, it's not developing more, it's just keeping what is there in a good stand. And so just to put it into context, the budget for that annually is around 550 billion South African rand for those four that I just mentioned. There's about 43% that was used in the previous year, so about 240 billion used. So the reasons given for that could be there's obviously sometimes there's procurement processes that take time, so that is taken, but the basics of repairing and keeping in good stand it's unfortunately linked to bad management and lack of management abilities and skills. So that is something that is addressed at a high level. So hopefully the budgets will be rolled out and that the services can be provided. What happened on the back of that was that there was a vote of no confidence in the mayor of the Joburg municipality. So Johannesburg went back quite fast in terms of service provision. We talked a lot about the water that's not available, etc. So it was the mayor, Dada Moreira, there was a motion of no confidence yesterday, but he survived it. It was votes 144 to 75. He's the ANC elected mayor. So the DA brought a vote of no confidence against him, but the Action SA, they didn't vote. It was 43 votes that didn't come in. So that is interesting developments, but it's all about service delivery. So hopefully, we respect there's situations where people are in management positions that don't have experience. So hopefully the government will find ways just to give them the necessary training where needed. So then also the second story you mentioned is in Cape Town. It was raining quite a lot yesterday. It's still raining as I speak, and there's a big cold front coming through in Cape Town for the next few days. But the Central Line, that's a good news. It's the Central Line train that's operational again in South Africa, in Cape Town. So there it is. That is part of PRASA. So the big celebration is the cost. So for typically from Philippi in the northern suburbs to Cape Town, a taxi will cost about 50 South African rand. A train will be 15 to 20 South African rand. So there's quite a big difference in what it costs to have the train. The taxis are not very happy about that. They prefer that the trains don't work. Obviously, it's more business for them. To put it into context, before 2019, when it was closed in 2019, there were 420,000 commuters using the train. It was expected that 100,000 used it yesterday. So in 2019, across the country, the government stopped private security protecting the train lines and the stations. So there was lots of vandalism, theft of infrastructure, sabotage by allegedly taxi owners. So it cost South Africa, it cost Cape Town 1.3 billion South African rand to get this train line going again. So hopefully that will be good news. It created lots of jobs, but lots of happy people that could take the train again in Cape Town.
We continue with the South Africa with Arrie Hougaard, but this report belongs to everybody as Masandawana Mamelodi Sundowns made Africa proud at the FIFA Club World Cup tournament in the USA. And of course, the Springboks are to face the Barbarians on Saturday in Cape Town. I trust you'll be at that game.
Yes, indeed. I've got my accreditation. I'll be there. I'll be a little bit protected if it rains in the media box. but it's great when the Springboks play in Cape Town. So that's a big one coming up, Ashwin, and I'm excited, especially with new players coming in. Vincent Tsitsuka, he's from the Sharks. I just love his energy, love him playing, and also Morne van der Berg. So that's a picture taken. That's Cape Town Stadium. Those are the two captains for Saturday's game. It's nice to have Test Rugby in Cape Town again. Siya Kolisi, the proud captain of South Africa, two-time World Cup captain. I must just get that in as well. But other sport news, that's the sport action. That's what it's going to look like when the Barbarians play. But that's the Mamelodi Sundowns. They called the Brazilians in South Africa, and they played against the Brazilian club in the Club World Cup in the USA. It was tough and competitive. It ended, unfortunately, 0-0 against Fluminense. That's a club from Brazil, but it wasn't enough for Sundowns to go through to the last 16. That was what they were aiming for. It was a heartbreak for them, a 0-0 draw, and that means that Fluminense will go through with Borussia Dortmund, just because they had a draw with Borussia Dortmund, and it was Mamelodi Sundowns that lost 4-3 to Borussia Dortmund. So it was so close, but they made Africa proud. They made South Africa proud. And they showed that South African teams and South African players, South African soccer, and around South Africa, Zimbabwe, and all those countries, we can lift our chin and we can compete with the best in the world.
All right, Arrie. Now, visitors to Johannesburg are encouraged to include a half-day tour of Soweto, where they can explore historic landmarks and enjoy the vibrant local food, music, drinks, and culture.
Yes, I've been there. I was there for rugby in Orlando. I was there in Soweto in Valakazi Street a few years ago, and it's a brilliant place to visit. Steep in history, because that was one of the important components of toppling over apartheid. And so that is Soweto from a distance, and there's half-day tours that you can visit that region, Soweto, if you're in Johannesburg or that area. It's why it's nice to visit. There's the Apartheid Museum, very interesting. There's also the President Nelson Mandela and Hector Peterson memorials. And then also Vilakazi Street. And that is important because it's the only street in the world that can say that they have two Nobel Peace Prize winners that stayed in the street. It is Archbishop Desmond Tutu and President Nelson Mandela. So, and then, of course, when you're in Vilakazi Street, it's the vibe, it's the music, it's the food. There's brilliant food in that area. It's just a nice place to visit. So the history is since 1880, there's been people living there from the gold rush, but only in 1930 it was officially called Soweto. And it was first called Southwestern Townships, and that is where the name comes from. If you take the first two letters from each of these three words, you spell Soweto. It's the Southwestern Townships. And it was called in 1930, and then it was shortened to Soweto. But a great place to visit when you're in Johannesburg, a proud tourism spot also for South Africa. So especially go to Vilakazi Street.
Truly sounds like quite the experience there, Arrie. Thank you very much for bringing us the South Africa report.
Nice talking, Ashwin. And unfortunately, we have some rain in Cape Town, so the cold will hit Namibia. But it's nice to stay warm in winter time as well. But blessings for everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks a lot, Arrie. We're going to have a look at the economic indicators before we swing to the news. You're still with Africa. Good morning. Let's get into economic news. As tensions escalate between Israel and Iran following a June 13 attack on Iranian military and nuclear facilities, African nations are beginning to feel the economic shockwaves. Regional leaders, including South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni, have joined global calls for de-escalation and a return to diplomacy. Ramaphosa stressed the need for UN-led verification of Iran's nuclear activities, while Museveni supported Israel's right to exist but condemned aggression. The conflict's most immediate impact on Africa has been surging fuel prices. In Uganda, fuel costs have already spiked by 100 shillings per litre, reflecting the sensitivity of African economies to global oil supply disruptions. Meanwhile, Namibia had made headlines for blocking a vessel carrying weapons destined for Israel, a rare diplomatic move signaling disapproval of military escalation. African commentators and analysts warn that prolonged hostilities could further inflate oil prices and destabilize fragile economies reliant on fuel imports. Experts also caution that deeper involvement by the United States and its allies could prolong instability and increase global energy market volatility. As oil prices continue to climb, citizens across Africa brace for higher transportation costs, inflationary pressure, and potential political fallout in countries where economic margins are already thin. In all the economic news story, in a bid to counter Russia's entrenched presence across Africa, Ukraine has launched a diplomatic push on the continent, opening new embassies, including one in Mauritania, while delivering food aid and offering military training. Kyiv's embassy in Nouakchott has coordinated the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Malian refugees in the Mbera camp and proposed training Mauritanian troops amid regional tensions with Mali, where Russia backs government forces. Ukraine's special envoy to Africa, Maxiu Subik, has framed these moves as both humanitarian and strategic, seeking to reposition Ukraine as a reliable partner in food security and stability. Ukraine has distributed nearly 300,000 tons of food to 12 African countries through the Grain from Ukraine initiative, rivaling Russian food diplomacy. However, Ukraine's efforts face stiff competition from Russia's 40 missions on the continent, deep intelligence networks, and arms trade dominance. While Mauritania accepted aid, the country has not publicly responded to the military training offer. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Africa strategy faces criticism for lacking coherence, evidenced by unfilled diplomatic posts and a downgraded Africa summit. Despite setbacks, Ukrainian officials remain optimistic, citing improved reputations and trade potential. Kyiv hopes these relationships will shift Africa's traditionally neutral stance and weaken Russia's grip on the continent. Those have been our economic news stories on Africa. Good morning, and that's been the broadcast. Thank you for joining us on DSTV 285, GOTV 25, oneup2.com, and Network Media Hub, as well as NTV Africa on YouTube. We'll be giving you some interesting updates tomorrow stemming from the continent, Namibia, including an update from the ACDT Golf Day, which will be taking place today at the Country Club in Windhoek. But for now, from me and the Africa Good Morning team, Sweda Jokanaka.